Here we are going to Channel Island, Santa Cruz Island.
Walk on all fours.
There's some sea lions.
You'll see them at the beach every so often. You don't want to think you're doing the Good Samaritan thing and rolling them back in the water because they are mammals. They can catch a cold and they have pretty sharp teeth. So we just call it proper.
Dolphins out here somewhere. Yeah, there they are. See them? Oh yeah, look at them. Check it out. Whoa! That's great. Here's one.
But what you're going to hear me talk about today is pretty much the theme of isolation and what isolation meant to the animals and plants that were on the island, the Native Americans, as well as the ranchers. And these islands, as I said on the boat coming out, have never been connected to the mainland. What happened to form these islands was that this is the North American plate, and this is the Pacific plate, and between my hands is the San Andreas Fault. As the Pacific plate moved north, 20 million years or so ago, a little spot broke off the plate, and instead of going northwest with the rest of the plate, it rotated about 90 degrees. And when that separation occurred, it created a trench in the ocean floor. And lava flowed up through the ocean floor, and that's what initially formed these islands, was that lava that bubbled up underground. And there's a tremendous number of caves on the island, and the reason for that is that the gas that was in the lava formed bubbles in it, and then once the islands made it up above sea level, erosion occurred and water flowed into those bubble holes, and some of the bubbles collapsed and made entrances. It evolved separately out here on the island, and for whatever reason, it evolved with this pink coloring on it. So it's coming back pretty well in patches. You can see it's growing up the hillside, and it's pretty well covering things here. You'll see it across the arroyo there. You know, it's starting to come back pretty well.
But it's always been here.
Pardon?
It's always been here.
It evolved out on the islands. When the islands came up out of the ocean, probably birds initially brought seeds from the mainland in their guts. When they pooped, the seeds came out, and for whatever reason, this evolved to be pink. Used the wood for building materials and mostly for pier pilings. Well, it turns out that eucalyptus stinks when it gets, I mean, it's horrible. It rots quickly when it's put in salt water. So that was a good idea that really didn't come to fruition.
What a beautiful
And
tree.
eucalyptus are particularly invasive because they suck up all the water around them. And they also, within the drip area, there isn't much that grows, as you can see here. So on other islands, we've removed these
Eucalyptus
trees and brought back in the natives, but these trees that you see here, they're particularly nice in the campground, and they aren't spreading out, so we're leaving them alone for the time being. It gets hot in the summer. There'll be a couple weeks out here in the summer where the temperature gets over 90 degrees and stays there. This plant has white or silvery colored leaves, and in the summer the heat causes those leaves to curl up. The dew during the evening, or the water-laden air comes in, and it collects on the back of those leaves and drips down into the center of the plant, and the plants grow outward. And you'll see examples of this as we go along the trail that are huge. And when the white leaf turns towards the sun, that reflects some of the sunlight as well, so it lasts. And they tie them with seagrass, and they also use the ribs of whales that had washed ashore, because they're naturally curved. And they would make these hemispherical huts out of those, and they would thatch it with seagrass. And the reason they like the ironwood is because it will last
Ironwood looks like
forever.
marijuana.
It just does not deteriorate. I mean, a branch could fall off this, and 100 years later it would still be laying on the ground in the same form. So another thing that was important to him, this is an area where we see, there's a little hummingbird, Anna's hummingbird up there, but we sometimes see scrub jays here, so keep your eyes peeled. There might be one or two around.
Anna's campus is covered with giant yellow stuff.
Here we are on Santa Cruz Island going on a hike. All this grass isn't indigenous, that's why it's all dead.
Okay, we're going to stop a couple more places on the climb up here, but this is our first stop, and the reason I wanted to call your attention to this is what we're standing on here. This retaining wall is dry stone masonry, and I had you look at that one across from the kiosk that supports the road that goes up over the other side, and all of that and all of this and all of what you see as we're hiking was made without mortar. What the builders did, and this was one of the skills that the Italians brought over with them, was they used the small stones as chinking, or for the equivalent of mortar, between the larger ones. And these retaining walls have been here for oh gosh, almost 160 years now, some of them. So you can see how well they last. Now the reason I told you to look at that retaining wall across from the kiosk is you may have noticed that the left-hand side of it, as we were facing it, had lighter rocks in it. That wall collapsed a number of years back. The National Park Service didn't want to replace it with something that wasn't the same as the rest of it. And it took them about 3 years before they found the people with skills to replicate this style of building. And they ended up having a bunch of people come over from Ireland. If any of you been to Ireland or England, you know, particularly up in the Yorkshire area in England and over in Ireland, all the stone walls are made there with dry stone masonry. So they had to search and search for these guys. They finally found them and brought them over here, and they recreated the part of the wall that had fallen down. Some of you will see the houses up there, or notice them if you haven't already. That's where our rangers and sometimes one of us naturalists will stay out here over the weekend. The rangers, when they come out for a week at a time, that's their housing up there.
Diatomaceous earth.
That have a silica cell structure on the outside. Silica is what glass is made out of. Glass, I mean silica plus a few other things. But when these little diatoms die from one-celled animals, they float around in the ocean. Eventually, when they die, they drift down to the bottom of the ocean. And they form deposits like this. Diatomaceous earth today is used for swimming pool filters, and it's also used as a non-toxic insecticide for bugs that have hard exoskeletons. You scatter it around, and if you got ants, it works its way under their exoskeleton, and it's like little knives. It just slices them up inside. So if you don't want to put things around because you have pets or whatever, you can use diatomaceous earth. But what happens to diatomaceous earth under heat and pressure is it metamorphizes into the samples that I've been passing around, which are called chert, C-H-E-R-T. And the reason that was important was because chert is in the same family as flint and jasper. Flint and jasper are also made out of diatomaceous earth, but flint has organic contaminants in it. That's what gives it the grayish-black color. And jasper has iron contaminants in it, which gives it that rusty red color. But they're all in the same family. And the Chumash, the Native Americans here, use that to make fishing hooks, spear and arrow points, and most important to them, micro drills. Now, micro drills, you can think of a knitting needle that's flattened on both sides. And what they used the micro drills for was to manufacture their version of money, or as some of the Western Indian nations called it, wampum. Or the Native, or the Americans called it wampum. And what they did was they went off into the shallows in the ocean and gathered up little snail shells called olivella shells. And they're kind of a purpley white color.
Here we are continuing on the hike at Santa Cruz Island. This group.
Okay. Island foxes. As I said at the beginning, we think that the Chumash brought them out as camp pets, or they might have rafted here. But they have definitely evolved differently. Their genetics are now significantly different from their gray fox relative on the mainland. And when they came out here, they had it great. And as they evolved, these foxes, bald eagles, are fish eaters. And so they never bothered the island foxes. They nest along the cliffs and they dive on the fish in the ocean. and that's their primary food source. But there was, back in the 60s and 50s, and I think even in the late 40s, there was a chemical company down by Long Beach called Montrose Chemical, and they were the world's largest maker of DDT. And when DDT was outlawed in 1976, I believe it was, give or take a year, they dumped 100,000 barrels of DDT into the ocean. And what happened was the little plankton got the DDT in their system. The little fish ate the little plankton, the bigger fish ate the littler fish, and it worked its way all the way up the food chain to the seabirds, the brown pelicans, the bald eagles, and every other seabird that ate the fish. And what it did to the bald eagles and the brown pelicans was that it, due to a chemical reaction in their bodies, the DDT broke down into another chemical which attacks the calcium in their eggs. And when they laid eggs in the nest and went to sit on the nest, the eggs were so fragile they cracked. So all the bald eagles that were on the Channel Islands died of old age. They couldn't reproduce. Nature abhors a vacuum, and what happened was that when the bald eagles were wiped out, golden eagles came in. Golden eagles hate bald eagles and vice versa, and whoever is established in an area keeps the others away. It's the same with crows and ravens. We've got ravens on the islands. You never see crows out here. So once the bald eagles were gone, the golden eagles, who were meat eaters, moved in. And at that time, the sheeps and the pigs had eaten all the cover off the island almost completely. Plus, there was this stupid little fox that came out in the daytime because it didn't have to hide during the daytime because it didn't have any predators, and it never bothered to look up in the air because it evolved never having an airborne predator. Well, the Goldens came initially for the feral piglets because they made a nice little lunch. And pretty soon they found that these dumb little foxes were around that came out in the daytime and never looked up, and they made a swell snack too. So when we learned that the foxes were decreasing in population, the Park Service put radio collars around some of them. And the radio collars would track their movements. When the Park Service hadn't seen movement in like 48 hours or so, they would go to the location where the transmitter was, and they kept finding gold eagle feathers by the kills. So they knew what was going on. And on San Miguel Island, which was the first one, that artifacts of the Chumash who inhabited these islands. And there'll be things like the micro drills, knives, fish bones, whale bones, camp implements, soapstone, all the things that they would use as household items and eventually broke and they throw away, plus all the detritus from things that they ate. So these areas are really important. Now, the Chumash, we think, populated these islands about 13,000 years ago.
Here we are as we continue on the hike at Santa Cruz Island.
Just single cell.
Oh, all right.
And they all drifted down to the bottom.
Diatomaceous. Diatomaceous earth. Okay, well, it's white. Interesting.
Yeah, you can see there's patches of it all over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Looks
all over there.
It looks like a trap at a golf course.
Yeah.
Sand trap. Here's a raven circling. Looking for Elijah to feed him some food. So this is Potato Harbor because it's shaped like a potato, supposedly. Somebody came up with that bright idea. Hence the name. Potato Harbor. I think they're pretty intelligent from what I've heard, but they just can't, you know.
Wasn't there a real Save the Dolphin movement a few years ago?
Yeah.
And there was, I don't know if they were threatened or something wasn't going quite right there.
It's possible. I know that they had Save the Whales. Everybody knows about Save the Whales, but Save the Dolphins, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know. I didn't hear about it. It could be.
Well, I was in Newfoundland in August, and we went on a whale watching trip and didn't see any whales there. And of course, moose are supposedly the provincial.
So here we're going back on the Channel Islands boat. Chris is asleep. There's the channel. The island is back there. It just came from Santa Cruz Island. We're really nice day out here. There's the wake.
It's really good to spend some time with this whale.
Come on, whale. There's a whale out here somewhere, they said. Come on, whaler. Come on, buddy.
These whales can be down for a couple minutes in here. Again, usually the single whales a little more shy, but again, trying to give them a chance to come back up. It could be a first time migration for this whale too, not sure. I'll just wait and see what happens. Typically these whales again, about 3 to 4 minutes is their longest downtime.
I saw him way out there.